And again, from the Kansas Association of School Boards, I'm Brian Jordan, Deputy Director of KASB.
I'm Angie Stallbaumer. I'm Assistant Executive Director for Legal Services.
So we wanted to, again, take the opportunity this afternoon to talk a little bit about things that have changed or evolved since yesterday afternoon when we came on and shared the latest related to schools and the continuous learning efforts that are going on in schools, as well as things that communities and boards need to be thinking about. So, Anne, do you want to recap kind of the timeline that schools are looking at getting services started?
Absolutely. So we know through the end of this week, we're going to be focusing on cleaning. We want to make sure that those facilities, as far as student attendance centers, are completely safe for people to come back to, and that's going to be the focus. So for the most part, people in those buildings are going to be the ones that are doing the work to ensure a safe environment. The order did not necessarily close our district offices, so the district offices may still be operational. If you drive by and see cars in parking lots, it hopefully is because they're just doing the work that's going to make it us able to bring people back later. Next week, so starting next week, we're going to be looking at possibly bringing staff back into the environment. But that's all based on following CDC guidelines, KDHE guidelines, and what you need to keep an eye out for is that we might have county health office, county health department requirements that are more strict. Mm-hmm. So we can only bring in groups of 10 at a time in certain areas requirement. We know that. We also, though, may have a situation where the buildings will remain closed because the county is a place that requires that.
Yeah, a lot of reported cases or something of that nature.
Right. So we already have some districts that are reaching out to their staff this week virtually, and I think now that we have the rules for how the district is supposed to proceed with filling out the year from an educational perspective, and Brian will talk to you about that. Yep. Now it's just planning. We're getting ready to go and gearing up with the hope that starting March 30th, that week, we could potentially see the start of some more student services.
Right. That would probably be the earliest that you would see services starting back up with the continual learning efforts that districts are putting together. There's been a few questions around, well, how can schools even bring kids back together in these small groups? The governor closed schools, and there was some conversation about that today. If you go out, I know it's on our website, you can go out and Google it, the governor's declaration for closing or executive order for closing schools. I think it's on page 2. There's a whole enumerated list of steps that schools consider after the school's been closed, and it's very clearly outlined in there that schools will start to put together continuous learning opportunities. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what those could potentially look like. The State Department of Education assembled what they called a continuous learning task force. They released their guidance for these continuous learning opportunities late last night. It was one of the first things that showed up in email inboxes this morning in some different groups. That was disseminated through what we call the superintendent listserv, and also through curriculum leaders from around the state. So those are the first eyes outside of that task force that have taken a look at that. Our staff also dug into that a little bit. That will eventually be posted on the State Department's website, but right now superintendents with their leaders in their district are trying to take a look at that and starting to figure out how to implement, how to follow some of that guidance that's in there. So talking a little bit about that, there's some key things inside of it. One of the things that you'll notice as you start to look at it, you'll see the phrase that less is more. People I think and I hope understand that we can't substitute what we were going to try to accomplish from March through May with the current time constraints that we're under to try to get kids these learning opportunities. And so parents, teachers, communities have to understand that it's going to look a lot different than what we're used to with our traditional schools, our traditional programs, but staff and leaders are being asked to be very intentional and really think about what the most important and critical competencies or learning components are that kids need to finish out this school year. So as you dig into that document, it's really structured around guiding questions for administration and guiding questions for teachers. So as administrators and leaders start to try to assemble or put together their plan for bringing teachers together in the next week to 2 weeks, there's some very clear guidance in there about how to do that, and enforcing those local county health department guidelines is at the top of the list of things that have to be considered when you do that. The questions for teachers then get into, okay, so what would be the priorities if you, in this period of time, from now until the end of May, that we need our kids to have so that they're not set back and are going to start off in a good place next fall when school starts. There's also some questions in there around technology that kids would have access to. They've done a nice job in that document of outlining things to consider and think about as you do your planning and your efforts. Some examples as I read through that is, keep in mind that kids are in an environment where there may not be technology access like they're used to having at school. Keep in mind that if they're a junior high or high school student, they may have multiple teachers that are putting together tasks or things that the students need to be doing. So there's some very good guidelines in there around lengths of time and key things that need to be thought through by the teachers as they put together their plans. So there's some really good guidance there to try to bring some consistency and also help with some of those discussions as district staff come together with that. Also in that document, they start to kind of outline some guidance and some considerations around special education services and English as a second language services. We know that there's still some waiting that's happening for some guidance from the federal government in those areas because those are federal programs, but there's some considerations that district planning teams and teacher teams need to be thinking about. We do know that you're going to have to provide special education services for students. It's the law. There is no way to blanket provide a waiver to exempt IEPs or anything of that nature. So that is very clearly spelled out in this document. There's also a section in there for local folks, teachers, administrators, boards to think about related to high school graduation. Dr. Randy Watson has been reminding superintendents that most of your districts have graduation requirements that exceed what the state board has established. And so local boards will need to be discussing how do we look at graduation requirements differently and focus on what those core competencies are for kids to graduate versus the amount of time that a kid spent in a class. So that's going to be a mind shift for a lot of people as they really try to hone it down to, okay, so what do we need to do to make sure that these kids graduate on time? There's a section in there that talks about that. There's a really nice section in there around family engagement and how to be a partner with families and guidance that families could have and use to give kids experiences and opportunities outside of the school day around volunteering, things that they can try to do. Volunteering may be a little tricky with some of the things that we're experiencing with the separation, but there's a whole section on family engagement. And then finally, there's a section in there on technology. There's actually an example survey that's in there that district staff are encouraged to utilize if they have not already surveyed their families to see what kind of technology needs they have. That kind of leads into another area that we heard today a little bit more about with technology. And do you want to kind of update the folks on that?
So KSDE has been working with area telecom providers. I believe they said they had 29 in on their conversation this morning. And so they are, what you're probably needing to do at a local level is if you already don't have information about connectivity for your kids, you need to send out those surveys. And so for any parents or patrons or others that may be listening, you need to really respond to those surveys because that information is going to be so useful in the school district putting together the plan for how are we going to serve you, right, especially in those areas where the county health department may not have allowed them to open the doors. So please fill those out, please send those out and ensure that your people know what they're for, why this information is important. And what we do know is that different areas have different capabilities, as do the different telecom companies. So in some areas, they said it may take months to do the construction necessary to get that high-speed connectivity out there, and that might not be workable in this instance. So every community is different.
Yeah, kind of on a side note with that, we learned today that there's a lot of businesses out there, national businesses, that are really looking at providing low or reduced cost devices because they understand what people are up against with the circumstances we're facing. Couple other things, kind of next steps. So we've already talked about the timeline going forward. This is kind of more for your district administration and your boards to be aware of. Starting tomorrow, no later than Monday, there's going to be some waiver documents coming out, or waiver guidelines coming out. The actual document should be out no later than Monday. In that waiver, districts need to spend a little bit of time completing some assurances related to saying that they'll complete a continuous learning plan, that they've got a plan in place to pay classified staff employees for the remainder of the year. There's some questions related in that waiver around who closed the school. There were some districts that were closed by the county health department prior to the governor's executive order. And then there's a section in there related to total number of hours completed before the schools were closed. The state law requires schools to have 1,116 contact hours. The state wants to know how many hours are going to be waived across the state with this closure of schools, and then this waiver is to get the remaining hours waived and given everybody a timeline to have school completed by June 30th, not June 30th, excuse me, the end of May for this school year. So that the next big lift for your local districts is getting that continuous learning plan put together, getting that waiver completed. That continuous learning plan, again, as I've already walked through, that guidance document that's going to be public here in the next week or so, is going to be a tool that they use to guide their work. One other thing to remind folks at the local level, as those continuous learning plans get put together, we're telling folks as an association need to make sure that the board has had an opportunity to look through those, review those. That waiver document that's going to go to the State Department of Education for approval needs to go in front of the Board of Education as well. The purpose behind that is transparency and communication. We want people to really understand what efforts the school is taking to make sure that kids are going to be safe and staff are going to be safe as they come back for these learning opportunities or offer these learning opportunities. So a couple other things that have sprung up.
We want to make sure that as we are moving through this process that we continue to share information with our legislators. It's probably best under these circumstances where they've been very involved in helping us move quickly and make exceptions and be able to bridge this gap, that we keep them cued into that information. We also wanted to let you know, if you hadn't heard already, that KASB has canceled all spring activities. And another piece of information that's going to be important for everyone is to know that they will still use this current semester's grades in determining eligibility.
For the next fall.
Right, for next fall. So, for any parents out there, you need to keep in mind that if your students had a grade that wasn't quite where it needed to be for eligibility purposes, you really need to, it could impact them. So as opportunities are given to you to allow your student to engage with the school and allow them to progress through the curriculum, it only works in their best interest to ensure that they're taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yep. Some other reminders for folks. Our traditional spring events that happen in school districts all across the nation every year are going to have to look different. Prom, graduation, we've got word that there's a lot of districts getting some real pressure to, hey, we need to have graduation, we need to have prom. But the reality of the situation is, with the guidance that we've been given around 10 people in groups and social isolation, those are just not going to be able to, that's not very good term, they're not going to happen as they've always happened in the years past. And so again, we understand we're in unprecedented times. Mm-hmm. Those things will have to look different. There's been some things going around out there around maybe we can do some of these things virtually. Don't quite know what that might look like, but there's who knows what could come out of some of these things. Angie, you want to talk a little bit about this other piece here around making some accommodations?
Sure. So, districts, as you're looking to invite staff members back into the school setting, if you're able to do that, it's a good idea to at least put the information out there that if you have any kind of risk factor that puts you at high risk in a COVID-19 outbreak, please let us know so we can work at accommodating you. So keep that line of communication open with your staff members. I don't know that we necessarily want to have a survey that they fill out specifically, but just say, we're here, we want to work with you, we want to support you in this. We don't want you to put you in extra high risk if you're already in one of those categories. So please reach out to your staff members, let them know you're willing to accommodate them, and that should serve everyone much better moving forward.
Yeah, so can't emphasize enough that this is a very trying time for families and kids, and we know that there's kids that are really going to miss out on some things they were looking forward to. We've told districts, reminded districts that you have students that have needs that they were meeting with counselors and social workers. We're encouraging districts to try to continue to offer those services either one-on-one or through social media or through a virtual platform. So I think that kind of brings us to a close for today. We encourage you to call, ask questions if there's things that we can help your district with. KASB is here to support school leaders and school boards as they try to navigate these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you.